On this episode of Andy's Autosport TV, we're going to install a TRD Supercharger on our Project 4Runner. So we took our 4Runner out on the trails a while back, and with our bigger tires on there, it just didn't quite have the oomph it needed to get in those over those rocks and through that mud. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some boost today. Now TRD makes a great root-style supercharger. This is going to give us a ton of low-end torque, build a lot of extra horsepower that we need to really help keep those tires clean when we go out in the mud. Now what boost is it's actually extra air that the engine couldn't take in on its own. We're actually forcing more air into it physically than what the engine can just breathe in on its own. This is done by a belt-driven supercharger in our case. Now what happens is the rotor spin, it forces extra air into the engine. For every 14 psi of boost that you're able to force into an engine, it basically doubles the amount of air than what that it could take in on its own. So today we're going to put the TRD Supercharger on our Project 4Runner. We should pick up between 5 and 6 pounds of boost. Now our Project 4Runner is absolutely bone stock at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some baseline runs on our Dynacom dyno. Now we've chosen the TRD Supercharger for our Project 4Runner, and this is basically a roots style blower. Now what that means is because we're a four-wheel drive and we're going to take this rock crawling, you need that instantaneous off-idle bottom end torque, and a roots blower is great for that. They're not so great up high, but down low at the very beginning, off-idle, off-throttle response is phenomenal. So we're going to get a lot of extra low-end horsepower and torque, which is exactly what we need for rock crawling in our Toyota. Now this kit comes complete with everything that you need. It comes with the instructions, which I always recommend that you read first cover to cover before you even pop the hood. This is going to let you do a couple things. Number one, you're going to be able to check the inventory and make sure that everything came in the kit that's supposed to, so you know that you're not going to have your car torn down while you're waiting on parts to show up. All right, now what comes in our TRD kit is everything that you need for a complete install, and it's designed to fit 4 different vehicles. It's designed for the Tacoma, the Tundra, the T100, and of course our 4Runner with the 3.4 liter engine. Now it just takes the place of the upper intake manifold. Now before you install this, always, always, always read your instructions from cover to cover. It also has an inventory list on what should have come in the kit, so you can verify that everything is there before you take your vehicle apart. This is going to save you time if there's some parts that aren't there, so your vehicle won't be down while you're waiting on those parts. Now, our kit came with a new tensioner because we're going to put a longer belt on, and we're going to have to put a tensioner in a different spot, so it came with a tensioner. It also came with the longer belt that we're going to need, came with the miscellaneous hoses we need, brackets also to relocate the throttle and the cruise control, also any valves, any miscellaneous T's that you need, or one-way valves. Also, it came with the extra long bolts that you're going to need to go through the top of the intake manifold. Now this is a complete kit from Toyota. Now what they did is they designed this kit so if you bought it when the vehicle was still under warranty, it would not void your warranty. So it's obviously well engineered to bolt right on your vehicle. Now let's go install this on our Project 4Runner. We began by disconnecting the battery. The alternator and power steering tensioners were loosened so we could remove the serpentine belts. The intake sensors were then disconnected and the intake tube removed after the vacuum hoses were pulled out of the way. We then unplugged the throttle position sensor, removed the throttle and transmission cables, and unbolted the throttle body unit from the intake manifold. The upper intake manifold was then disassembled and any attached vacuum hoses were disconnected. The lower intake manifold followed suit and was unbolted from the engine. Using the provided template, the timing cover trim piece was marked with a felt tip marker. Then it was trimmed to make room for the supercharger. The spark plug wires were then rerouted in front of the timing cover to keep them out of the way. At this point, the engine dipstick tube was temporarily removed to make room for the new serpentine belt. It will be relocated in an upcoming step. The wire loom you see here had to be moved, so the supplied relocation bracket was installed and the loom reattached. The new belt tensioner bracket was then bolted onto the engine and torqued to the recommended specifications. Next, the new belt was routed around the lower pulleys and the new tensioner was torqued down. The idle air control valve hose was then cut and the provided one-way check valve was installed in line. We are now finally able to install our new TRD Supercharger unit with the provided hardware. From this point on, it was mostly a matter of reassembly. On went the serpentine belt and throttle body, as well as the factory air intake assembly. In order to keep the throttle and transmission cables properly aligned to the throttle body, the provided bracket was then bolted on. Depending on your application, you may have to tee into some of the vacuum lines to make sure that everything, such as our four-wheel drive vacuum switching valve, will remain in working condition. To finish off the installation, the factory oil dipstick tube was reinstalled with the relocation bracket to keep it safely away from the supercharger drive belt. Now let's get her fired up and head over to our dyno and see the results. All right, our peak horsepower went from 163 with our baseline all the way to 210 to 215 horsepower with the supercharger. Now this is a relatively low boost application, but phenomenal. And what I'll tell you makes a big difference is the off-idle throttle response. A positive displacement blower like a root style supercharger has instantaneous throttle response. The torque that this picked up on the bottom end really helps make the mass move. Now our peak torque numbers went all the way to 240 foot-pounds of torque from 195 that it had before, but all the way across the RPM range. This is going to make this an absolutely great vehicle to go rock crawling or even just daily driving. You can install this kit in about 3 to 4 hours with ordinary hand tools right in your driveway. Very simple, very straightforward, and there are no electronic or fuel upgrades needed. Toyota designed all this around the factory fuel system. Very straightforward install. If you have any question about this or any other products on Andy's Autosport website, feel free to call one of our knowledgeable sales staff at 1-800-419-1152 or email us at info@andysautosport.com. We hope you've learned something today, and we'll see you on another episode of Andy's Autosport TV.